What's up, guys? Coach Neil Woodall here with the Playmakers Lightning program. Today I want to address a question that I get pretty often from parents and coaches alike, and that's in regard to their athletes doing what's called heel striking. What I mean by heel striking is once they're out running, they're here and landing on their heel versus staying on the ball of their foot, landing here. So what I find is usually athletes, prepubescent, any age before 12 or as they're going through puberty, what happens is they hit these growth spurts and they have these really long legs, and as a result they have a tendency to overstride. And what happens when you overstride is your foot doesn't come up underneath you and you end up reaching, and when you're reaching you end up landing on the heel versus the ball of your foot. Also, I have athletes who do multiple sports. So there's some athletes that run cross country in addition to playing a power sport like soccer, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is. And usually cross country running, they've gotten away from it. They're starting to coach athletes more to be more forefoot strikers or midfoot strikers versus heel to toe, which used to be the old school way of teaching athletes how to run, or teach cross country runners and marathon runners how to run. Now they're teaching more forefoot striking. But what happens is an athlete that runs cross country and then they try to transition back into their power sport, and they still run with that same form that they're using whenever they're running longer distances. So there's a couple of tests that I administer when I first start working with an athlete. The first test is going to be the initial takeoff test, just to see what they look like in their dig phase. Their dig phase is that first 5 to 10 yards of the sprint. So I'll have them line up on the line. All they're going is about 5 yards. Realistically, all I need is those first 3 steps to see how well they're taking off, to see their knee drive and their body position. So I'll have the athlete perform it after they go through a dynamic warm-up. I'll have them perform the test twice. I'll film them, put it in slow motion so we can see what their initial first step looks like when they're coming off the line, their second step, and their third step. The second test that I administer is going to be a version of what's called a flying 60. Basically, they're going to be building up speed for 20 yards, and then for the next 20 yards, they're going to be going into top end speed. So they're transitioning from the acceleration phase into maximal speed. And what that gives me is an idea of what they look like when they're wide open, when they're out in the open field running. What I see usually from athletes, again, with these longer limbs, is they have a tendency to overstride, and they have a tendency to kind of lean back instead of maintaining that slight forward body lean. So I'm going to show you the test that I administer, and then I'm going to show you a couple of drills that you can do with your athletes to help them, to keep them from going into that overstride and being heel strikers, and to force them more up on the ball of their foot. All right, so the first test is going to be a 2-point stance and start. Again, they're only going 5 yards. So if you're a right-handed athlete, you'll have your left foot up on the line, right foot back. If you're a left-handed athlete, you'll have the opposite, right foot up on the line, left foot back. So when they set up, toe on the line, toe to heel distance from that front foot, and then slide another foot back from there, and then go hip width with the feet. And then what you're going to do is bend that front knee, and you want to have a 70-30 distribution on your lead leg. So if you're the right-hand athlete and have your left leg out front, you'll have 70% of your weight on your left leg, 30% on your back right leg. You also want to have that knee more forward. You're going to be up on more on the ball of your foot. You're not going to have the heel come all the way up off the ground. It'll be a slight rise in the heel up off the ground. From here, going to fire that hand through. And again, they're only going to go 5 yards. So with that first step's going to tell me how well they're getting their back knee firing through. And then also I'm going to see where that foot lands. Usually where that first foot lands is going to determine their next 2 to 3 steps. Now there's some athletes like Usain Bolt, if you watch him run, he technically doesn't run with a great start, but he can more than make up for it with his long strides and just how powerful of an athlete he is. So that's the first test that I administer. Again, I film it, I put it in slow motion to see what their first 2 to 3 steps look like, and from there I can get a lot of information. The second test I administer is what's called a flying 60. The athlete's going to start out on the starting cone. They'll build up speed for 20 yards where the second cone is going to be. By the time they get to that second cone, they should be hitting top end speed. So they should be transitioning from the acceleration phase into maximum speed. What this is going to do, it's going to be a good idea of what they look like when they're out in the wide open field, what their running mechanics look like, if they're overstriding, if they're landing more on their heel, if their foot is landing more up underneath the hip. I'll be able to determine all these things from the flying 60 test. So if I come to the realization that they're going to be more of a heel striker, one of the first drills that I'm going to work with them on is going to be a wall drive. Now, there's some coaches out there who are not crazy about the wall drive because they say it does not actually mimic real acceleration mechanics. However, if I'm working with an athlete and they have a tendency to overstride, what this is going to do is going to actually be more of a compensation to teach them how to get their foot almost further back than would be normal in their normal stride pattern. Normally, when they're running, their foot should be landing directly underneath their hip. When we're doing the wall drive, which I'm about to give you a demonstration of, their foot's going to actually be landing a little bit further back behind their hips. So this is what the wall drive is going to look like. They're going to place both hands at chest height. They're going to maintain a good forward body lean. Again, my feet are actually going to be back behind my hips. We don't want our butt and hips back here. We also don't want our hips forward. We want to have a good spinal position, chin in. And what I'm going to do is drive my knees. So there are different cadences you can do. You can do 1, you can do 1, 2. Each time you want to see your athlete fire that knee up and hold that position at the top. What they're going to do is they're going to have their foot in a dorsiflex position. So you don't want their toes pointed down, you want their toes flexed up. That's how their foot should be whenever they're doing any kind of sprint mechanic drills, especially when they're out doing their regular sprints. They should have that dorsiflexion. That way when they land with that foot underneath the hip up on the ball of the foot. Now another variation that you can do with this is you can add some resistance by adding an ankle band. So if your athlete has a tendency to overstride, the wall drive is a great starting place. It teaches them to keep their feet more up underneath them, how to get their knees up, and to maintain that dorsiflexion while maintaining that good forward body lean. All right, another drill that I like to use with my athletes, whether they have a tendency to overstride or whether they just need to work on good running mechanics, is a heavy sled march. A heavy sled march is going to teach them to maintain that good forward body lean, good knee drive, have the foot land up underneath their hip, but at the same time, they have to create force by pushing the sled. So again, you want this to be heavy. If the sled's not heavy, they're not going to maintain that forward body lean and they're not going to get that good force production that we're looking for. So here is a demonstration of the heavy sled drive. So with the sled drive, I have to maintain that good solid forward body lean, get good knee drive, have the foot land up underneath my hip while producing enough force to get the sled moving forward. That's the reason why it's such a great drill to use with your athletes when trying to teach them good sprinting mechanics, good knee drive, good force production. So those are just a couple of drills that I use with my athletes. You can see results pretty much immediately once you start to implement these things with your athletes. You will be amazed, especially with that stance and start test, once you start to do some wall drives and knee drives, what they look like when they're firing off the line. You're going to see that first initial step, they're going to get that knee up. The first time that I usually administer the stance and start test after we go through these drills, they get such good knee drive with that initial step that they almost stumble in their second and third step because they're not used to getting that good force production and good knee drive. So have them do the drill a couple of times after they go through these movements. Once you do that, you'll see the mechanics, how they change, how they're more up in the balls of their feet, getting good knee drive. And the big thing is once they utilize these drills, they need to practice these things whenever they're going to their practices. Make sure that they're maintaining good running mechanics because, realistically with an athlete, I'll only have them for an hour, every other day if I'm lucky. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that's 3 hours out of the week. The rest of the time, it's up to them what they're doing and how much they're actually practicing and putting these things into play. If they're not actually taking the stuff they're learning here and applying it, it doesn't matter all the work that we put in here. They got to be taking this stuff and using it themselves. And you as a coach or you as a parent can help them as well. All right, guys. So these are a couple of tests that you can administer with your athletes and also a couple of drills that you can do to teach them the good sprinting mechanics.